Hi, everyone. This is Ashley Halliday-Schmant, again, the Director of the Northwest Michigan Coalition to End Homelessness. On behalf of the Michigan Balance of State Continuum of Care today, to provide another training for our training series around doing really effective housing-based case management. So again, our training outline, we've gone through a lot of these, and maybe you're at a different place along the outline here, but today we're going to be talking about number 4, how to have productive home visits once your program participant has been housed and you are now offering in-home housing-based case management. We're going to skip through to our slides. There we go. So providing productive home visits. And I think the first thing I want to kind of ground us in before we get started is that we are of the belief that really effective case management does not happen in your office. We're not making people arrange transportation and all of that good stuff to come to our office that may or may not be near where they live. We come to them. We bring the services to them in home. And that just sets the stage for a different kind of relationship and rapport building that we don't really see when we offer services in a setting that can sometimes feel a little bit institutionalized or professional, or I guess overly professional. And it really, when we're doing services in home with clients, it really just helps break down some of the walls and creates a more open and honest space for us to begin to work. So here's some tips for setting the tone or setting the stage for productive home visits. Whenever we go into a home, within reason, you want to ask the client to have their TV, radio, phone, whatever, to be turned off. Now, I know for some folks with varying degrees, maybe of like mental illness or something like that, radios, TV, whatever, okay to be turned on if we're using them kind of as a coping mechanism. Where we like to ask and set the boundary that they be turned off is if someone is just kind of zoning out watching TV, if there's loud music playing, so loud that you can't hear each other talk, things like that. We really want to create the space where you and the program participant can really have an open and meaningful conversation. So it's okay to set the boundaries right away and ask that those things be turned off if they're a distraction. You can ask them to hold non-urgent calls and texts and leave your own phone alone for the duration of the meeting. If you are sitting there in their home and you're playing on your phone the entire time, if your ringer is turned on and the entire session you have with your client, your phone is buzzing and going off, that's not creating an environment that's open and trusting, right? I know we're all busy people. There are emergencies that come up, but we really want to keep most of the phone stuff for after the visit. And what you can do, I know life happens and crises arise at home or at work. So if you are really waiting for an urgent call, a good tip is just in the beginning of the session when you're kind of setting the goals and what's to be worked on today, you can just tell your client, hey, I'm waiting for this really important call from whoever, so at some point my phone is ringing and I see it's from this person. I do need to step out for a minute and take the call, but it won't be long and I will be right back and we'll continue our session. Okay, and most people are going to be okay with that. Now, if that's every single time and you're on the call for the duration of the meeting, that's another issue, but we want to make sure that we're just honest with our clients. You really want to ask that there be no guests during the visits. We've had a lot of issues around folks having, 10 or more, 5 to probably 15 people in their home sometimes when we're trying to conduct home visits, and that's not helpful, right? If you it's just never a good idea. So we really want to start setting up the client for them to be the one enforcing the boundaries within their home. However, if you need to model that the first couple of times, that's okay too. Now, if it's, one friend visiting from out of town for a weekend or something like that, just ask that they go in another room or go take a walk or whatever. Now, sometimes we'll have people that do want to participate in the meeting and the client is okay with that. And if it's productive, fine. If it's not, that's another thing you're going to have to address, that these clients are really, these meetings are really around housing stability for the tenant and their family, not everyone else that ever visits the home, right? You want to be on time and stay on time. That goes back to do what you say you're going to do. You need to be respectful of the client's time. We don't show up to clients' homes unannounced. We don't stay for 3 hours. You set up scheduled appointments. You show up on time. If you're running late, you let the person know. You give them a call, a text, whatever, that you are running late, and then be there as soon as you can. It's okay to acknowledge, I know this may be hard for you. And so that tip there is really just around setting the stage for motivational interviewing and using motivational interviewing as your main technique in moving the clients through the process of change and changing some of the ways they approach their lives, and how that all ties back to being able to maintain their housing. So it's okay to just acknowledge that this might not be the easiest thing in the world to go from homelessness to housing. And there's going to be bumps along the road, but you as the housing-based case manager are going to be walking alongside them throughout that process and really helping them to establish good practices in maintaining their tenancy. It's also okay to note discrepancies and establish an honest environment. So that really also goes back to motivational interviewing and something, really, it's really rooted in reality testing. So if someone says, I don't have guest issues, I don't know what my landlord is talking about, that I'm having parties all the time, and you, every time that you show up, it's like a flock of people leaving out the back door every time they see your car pull in the driveway, you can honor that and say, okay, well, it's just hard for me to understand that when I'm showing up and, 10 people leave out the back door. What's that about? Talk to me a little bit more about your need to have that many people over, and how can we do that in a way that isn't disruptive to everybody else? Is there a way that you can think of to still maintain relationships with people without disturbing your neighbors and breaking your lease, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, so noting discrepancies, doing some reality testing throughout the session, that's okay too. So you want to be present, listen, embrace the silence and awkward pauses. Again, all of this stuff related to motivational interviewing and really those active listening and empathic listening techniques. Embrace your role as a change agent in your tone. And that's really going back to the other things I've mentioned on this slide, just being not always testing what the client is saying, but acknowledging and then challenging when it's appropriate. Okay, so like I said, if the focus of the meeting is guest issues, on that particular day, maybe there's a complaint from a neighbor that, there's some degree of party going on at night or whatever, lots of people always around the apartment. First we're going to talk about the behavior. We're going to acknowledge the feelings surrounding that, and then move to a place of action and accountability on the client's behalf. So some more tips at the start and about halfway through, we want to remind them about the time we have for the visit. So when I was doing this work, I would like to, when I would show up, I'd say, okay, we have about, whatever it is, maybe let's say 45 minutes. That's kind of the sweet spot. Depending on what the task is for the day, but you show up, say, hey, it's about 3 o'clock. We've got about 45 minutes here today. What would you like to accomplish in the time we have today? Here's some things I thought about, if they can't think of anything, that are really housing focused. But you want to offer them the ability to come up with the tasks first, right? And if they're saying, well, I really want to do XYZ thing, has nothing to do with housing, has nothing to do with housing stability, maybe then offer some redirection around, be happy to provide you a resource of someone that might be able to help you with that. But today I'm here to talk about your housing and how you're going to be able to maintain it long term. And if you start every single session with that, people start to hear it. If you start to say, okay, how does this relate to your housing? What can we do today to make sure that you're one step closer to maintaining your housing and being able to do this on your own long term? You're doing all of that through asking probing questions. Like I said, using motivational interviewing techniques, using active language. One thing I'll say is we're never providing advice. So a lot of this stuff is rooted in counseling techniques and kind of like that empathic listening model. However, it's always going back to, you are a professional providing a service. We're not friends with our clients. We're not coming over to just do chit chat and shoot the breeze and leave. Now, there's some of that, right? There's some of that when you're building rapport. We're not robotic in this work, but at the same time, we're not there to provide friendly advice, okay? We're not going to a client's house and saying, well, if it were me, I'd do X, Y, and Z thing. Because guess what? It's not you, okay? It's them. And it's not in your control what they do. What we can do is offer tips, techniques, and we can be there to help them through some of the challenges that they face. You want to manage your own time and manage your own safety. So managing your own time would really look like being very organized and scheduled. So the 4 to 6 HF and 5 to 8 RRH mean within the different ranges of the full SPDAT. Housing First is like that highest acuity range on the full SPDAT. You don't want to have more than 4 to 6 appointments of high acuity people in one day. You don't want to have more than 5 to 8 rapid rehousing clients in one day. That is, just a suggestion. What I would say is you probably don't want to have more than, depending on how far you travel, you don't really want to have more than like 5 appointments a day, period, unless they all live in one building. And you can just go apartment to apartment over and over, but typically that's not the case. Typically across the balance of state, we're serving people in large geographies. We're traveling a distance to get to people's houses. And you don't want to do that more than probably 5 times, especially if you're spending an hour each time. Okay, so those are just some tips. That's going to vary based on your travel time. And then managing your safety. We are in people's homes. That does not go hand in hand that you are then unsafe if you are in someone's home. But what you do want to do is really get yourself acquainted with your agency's policies around how to be safe in the homes of other people. And if you're doing this housing-based case management work and you are a program manager or a director of an agency providing this service, you really, really want to think about what a good safety plan for your housing-based case managers looks like and offer tips, training, tools, all of that stuff around how to be safe in people's homes. All right, so next we're going to talk about adding structure to a home visit. So like I said, we don't want to be so robotic that people do not open up to us, but we don't want to be so casual that you're not really getting anywhere and you're not able to move to a place of action with your client because they look at you as just a friend. So this is a great, just, you don't have to say this word for word or anything, but this is just some good phrasing to get started. So hi, my name is Ashley. Not my name is, hi, Tom. We'll say the client is Tom. Hi, Tom. It's good to see you today. We have about 45 minutes for our visit today. As we talked about on Monday, we agreed we would address going over your lease again, practicing what to do if there's an emergency, related to something in your apartment, who to call, and then setting up your first appointment with your new community mental health provider in this area. Easy peasy, right? Some of those tasks that I just came up with off the top of my head might take longer, and then we just move them to the next time. So your visits are documented and sequential, so there is some prep work that goes into this as well. So if your case notes are really good, you're going to document the things that you worked on, the things the client is still struggling with, things they did really well on, and then what you're going to do next time. And so any of A, B, or C thing that didn't get addressed this time moves to the next appointment. At the end of dealing with those objectives for today, we'll select some for our next visit. And you just go through that process of selecting new goals for your next visit. It's really important too, I'll say, to make sure, if you're a program manager, to make sure that all of your staff, so anyone doing housing-based case management in the community, has access to a laptop, and preferably a lightweight one. Really preferably, it would be like a Microsoft Surface or something that can go from tablet to laptop interchangeably. I know for our staff, we've had kind of a bunch of different versions of this. We've had big, heavy, bulky laptops way in the beginning. And case managers gave us feedback like, that's too heavy to carry around all day. So then we moved to really lightweight, smaller, thinner laptop. And then eventually we went to something that was like a tablet. So the top of the laptop could actually fold over as a tablet, and it doesn't have to be a tablet. It just needs to be like a touch screen laptop so that folks can actually sign their names on documents right then and there. So you're not printing paperwork, you're not scanning paperwork all the time. It just makes life a whole lot easier. The other thing I'll say is to make sure that all of your case managers have access to Wi-Fi and have access to an agency cell phone. And I know, again, agencies are at different levels related to that. Most grants allow you to pay for that sort of thing. So you want to make sure that you either have a hotspot on your cell phone to make sure you have Wi-Fi, if that's available where you work. I know that's not readily available in all areas, but as much as you can, make sure that folks have access to that, because in the sessions, maybe a client needs to apply for food stamps. So you need to get on MI Bridges. You can just do that right in the home. Just whip out your laptop and your hotspot and go for it. Then we're not having clients in the office all the time. So at the end of a home visit, we want to summarize what was discussed and accomplished during the actual visit. So go over the things that they achieved during the visit, and what you talked about and what might feel important for the client to move to the next meeting. And that would be next, establishing objectives for between visits. So if you want to do this really structured work, if you have somebody who's really invested in the process, you can actually assign homework in between sessions. So you can say, okay, between now and next session, you said you wanted to increase your income. So why don't you apply for 2 jobs? Or think about 2 places that might be interesting to you to work for. Get connected with Michigan Works, whatever it is. Notice how all these things are happening after they're housed, not while they're still homeless. Housing first. So you're doing all of these things in housing. If you aren't doing that already, you'll be amazed at what people can accomplish once they're stably housed. Okay. If we're asking people to apply for all these jobs and do all these things while they're still on the streets, you will see how little sense that makes once you start doing it with people in housing. Okay, it doesn't eliminate the trauma, it doesn't erase some of the things that people go through or have went through in the past, but it starts them at a different place. They're starting in a place where there's more stability than they've known, prior to being housed. You also are going to establish objectives for the next visit for you and the client. It's not, if you're bringing them, I don't know, some resource guide. I don't know. If you say, oh yeah, I'll get you connected with so-and-so in between meetings, that's your homework, and make sure that they know that you're working also. Note on the calendar the date and time of the next visit. One of our previous trainings in this series talked about making sure every client that you provide housing-based case management for has a calendar and magnets and, somewhere on their fridge or wherever they see or go by a lot, there's the calendar. You write right on the calendar when the next appointment with you is. And then find something positive to acknowledge, however small. So in the worst of cases, in the most severe cases that I've worked with, I would try really, really hard. And it helps in your practice of being really strengths-based with people. I would try every single time, no matter how bad the session went, to find something positive. So for example, we had one gentleman we housed, very, very struggled with severe mental illness, severe addiction issues, wasn't maybe the most pleasantly presenting person in the world. So maybe if the session, we didn't really accomplish much, I just saw in housing, he's still alive, the house is in decent condition, and we accomplished just a small goal related to that, that's fine. And I would find something positive hey man, thanks for not screaming at me when I was at the door today. That was nice. That made me feel welcome in your home. Or, wow, it looks like you washed that dish that had been sitting there for 3 weeks, or whatever. You're focusing on one positive thing. You're building on that every single session. And like I said, that really just helped me practice approaching the work from a strengths-based perspective every single client, every single time. All right, so before you leave, and this is really in the beginning of doing home visits, not necessarily, you don't need to do this every single time. This is maybe in the first, few weeks of being housed. You want to ask them 3 things they think might go wrong in the first few days of housing and help them plan for what they'll do if those things happen so that they stay housed. Remember, the main goal of your work is to help your client stay housed and maintain that housing, to never experience homelessness again. So in doing so, we want to ask them 3 things they think might go wrong, and what are they going to do if that happens? So maybe it's, well, if my friend Joe shows up, who's still homeless and brings 5 friends to stay over, I am worried about that happening. So because they'll maybe stay here, maybe they'll invite more people, my landlord will find out, they'll get loud, I don't know what to do if that happens. Okay, so what are some ways, and you want to make sure you're leaving enough time to actually talk through these things. It's not on your way out the door, you're putting your keys in your car saying, oh, what do you think's going to go wrong? No, it's an intentional, built out, carved out period of time during the session that you can really talk about this stuff. So if, like the example I just gave, if, oh, my friend Joe might come with all these friends, they might get loud and party, and I don't want that at my place. Okay, does Joe know where you live? Yes. Okay, what time do you think you might show up? 7. Okay, so at 7, do you feel confident that if he shows up, you'll be able to answer the door and tell him no? No, I don't think I'll be able to answer the door, blah, blah, blah. Well, you don't have to answer the door. So show them how to lock the door. I mean, in the crisis of that, you want to just really focus on locking the door, not answering the door. If it escalates, we can call the police, right? But the moment folks let other people into their home, their behavior becomes their responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of coaching around that. And notice how I keep bringing up the guest issue. It's happened a lot over the years. So in the immediacy of it, you can say, okay, well, maybe for tonight, you lock the door, don't answer it. But the next time I come over, I really want to talk about ways you can start saying no, or other things you can offer people. Like, sure, we can still hang out, Joe, but it can't be at my place because I don't trust that other people won't come and really affect my housing. Okay, so we're always offering coaching around what the solution is. However, in the immediacy of that situation, you might offer some other solutions, okay? And then finally, you want to ask them 3 things they were great at the last time they had successful housing. And if they can't come up with anything that they personally were good at, could say, well, talk to me about the last time you had housing. Was there something you really liked in that housing? You know, what was the best thing about being housed? And you'll be surprised at what people come up with. And you'll be also surprised at what you can build off from when folks say that thing. Okay, so we had one client we worked with years ago who said, well, he was having a really difficult time staying in his place. So he had been chronically homeless on the streets for many, many years. And he was having a really hard time just feeling like his place was home. And we tried different the homemaking techniques and things like that. They weren't working. He wasn't really open to things that we were suggesting. So we just had a conversation and said, hey, what is it about the place? Like, is it something about the actual environment you're in? And he said, well, this one time I had a house or an apartment and it had a fireplace. And that just made it feel like home. It made it feel like I was actually in a home, not just some random apartment, right? And what we were really trying to do was help him to stay at home more, because what he would do, and this is a great harm reduction strategy, what he would do was go out, drink on the streets, get, blackout intoxicated, forget where he was, cause some sort of an issue, or just pass out on the streets and then get arrested for drunken disorderly or public intoxication, whatever. And what we wanted to do was, obviously he still wanted to keep drinking, or was having a hard time stopping in the moment. So a harm reduction approach to that would be, how can you drink in your home rather than out on the streets and pass out every night? You have a home. You're safer in your home to do that in your home rather than on the streets. He talked about the fireplace. We worked with a company who donated time and stuff like that. I think we might have even had some donated funding to just buy like we talked with the landlord and all of this. He was in like a trailer, like a mobile home. So we were able to install this. Not going to happen in all places. But one of those like gas, like standalone, almost like a space heater, but it was safe and it had like a shut off, an auto shut off thing. So he wasn't going to burn the place down if he passed out, things like that. So it was like harm reduction and helping him stay in his housing longer. And then this is kind of another thing that we used to put up, I believe, in our offices. Always be asking your clients throughout your home visits, how do you think this will impact your housing? Okay, we always want to be asking that. Doing it, you'll find different ways to phrase this or frame it in your conversations, but you want to make sure your client knows that's what you're there to work with them on. And then these are really just kind of, again, rooted in motivational interviewing, but the process of setting goals around housing-based case management, home visits, and support. So after a few weeks of being in housing, you are going, and sometimes it takes a few months, just depends, but you'll really see where the client stands on some of the struggles they might have and some of the things they're really great at in housing. So about a month in, and depending on the severity of need, this might be a little bit longer, but we really want to take the client's assessment of the current situation. So take their assessment of what's been going on over the past month. Have they received any lease violations? If so, what's the client's vision of the future? Or even if not, what's the client's vision of the future? Do they think they're going to continue to receive none? How are they going to react if they receive another one? What can we do to prevent them from happening again? You want to help the client identify actions they think are necessary in order to prevent or improve or whatever around the goal. You want to talk about obstacles the client can foresee happening in the future in getting in the way of achieving their goal. What are some approaches and actionable things you and the client can do to address those obstacles? Plan for supports around that, and then help them establish implementation of the plan. Okay, so if you really find yourself struggling in goal setting with a client, like maybe you're just seeing really low motivation towards a goal, or maybe you're seeing just really stunted progress toward a specific goal, pull this out and not right there with the client, but look at it before you go to the home visit and think, okay, this is how the plans, these are the steps we're going to talk about as we talk through the goal and eventually land on implementation of the plan. So establishing all of these or having a conversation around all of these boxes will then create kind of a place to start when you talk about implementing the plan. And, just sub in whatever goal you're working with your client. This fits for most things. So the other thing I want to mention here, in the first month of housing, and like I said, this can be couple months, couple weeks, whatever. The first time someone's housed, the abnormal is normal. Ups and downs are very, very common. The first few months of housing is like a roller coaster. We're going to have really good days, we're going to have really bad days, and we're going to have a lot of just stagnant in between days. So how are you kind of going to help the client create motivation without having, these high peaks and valleys? A lot of folks experiencing homelessness have been homeless for a very long time or have been in housing several times, and it never seems to click. It never seems to work out. So a range of emotions and actions can be misperceived by us as the client not wanting housing with support or trying to sabotage the housing with support. And there's so much of that kind of self-sabotage stuff that's really hard to work through with clients. But really, if we just always strip that down to, okay, we feel like they're self-sabotaging. What is it really about? Is it about being scared that they'll fail again? So do you need to up the supports in areas that they're really scared of failing in? Okay, so how do we gauge or kind of match our supports with the client's real needs, fears, and barriers? A lot of people do second guess the decision to participate in housing, and that's pretty common. Folks, we've heard a lot of times say, oh, it's just easier. It was almost easier being homeless. I didn't have to answer to anybody. I could do whatever I want. I didn't have to do X, Y, and Z thing. And that's okay. That's okay to feel like that. We want to always be taking it back to a place of acknowledging the feeling and then moving toward action. Or maybe we're just acknowledging the feeling and sitting with it. Maybe that's all we're doing. Okay. It really just depends on where they're at and where they're coming from if they say things like that. But again, that's common. That's okay if people are saying that. You don't need to pull the rug out from under them and say, okay, just leave. If you don't like it, you think it's better being homeless, go be homeless. We're not going to do things like that, right? We're going to sit with them in that feeling and just acknowledge it, reflect it back, say things like, it sounds like it's really different being in housing than it was being on the streets. Silence, right? And then they can kind of process through that stuff. And then again, it's likely there will be a honeymoon period followed by intense need for support. So a lot of people, they get into housing. It's butterflies and rainbows, man. It's really, really good for a short period of time. And you think, wow, I had no idea this person would do so well in housing. And then the bottom drops out, right? And then something happens and it all falls apart. So it's kind of like that honeymoon period in relationships. So you just want to be prepared for it, be expecting something to happen, and being prepared for when it does. All right, so the 5 necessary functions in the first month of someone being housed, and these are all trainings offered throughout this series, are creating a crisis plan with your client, getting a budget established, doing your first case plan, doing the first full SPDAT assessment in housing, which will then inform the case plan, and also creating the personal guest policy with the client. These are all things, like I said, you'll do in housing with the client. This will take up, entire sessions sometimes of the housing-based case management process. And there are all things will help you get trained and educated on. So we're getting into crisis plan, so that's where we'll stop today. Come back to our training series and learn more about the 5 necessary functions in the first month of housing. Thanks so much.